Part 8. Trying to end it, I bought a hammer. That sounds almost funny now, writing it down. Go to a hardware store specifically to buy a hammer to kill a cassette tape, standing in the checkout line behind a man buying birdseed and a woman buying paint samples, feeling like the only person in the world who understood what was actually at stake in that ordinary Tuesday afternoon. But I was not laughing that day. I laid the tape and the boombox out on my kitchen table, and I smashed them both. I smashed the plastic casing until it cracked into a dozen pieces, until the thin brown tape spilled out in loops across my table like intestines, glinting faintly under my kitchen light. I smashed the boombox speakers until they caved in, until the plastic housing split down the middle and the wiring hung out like something eviscerated. I did not stop until my arm was tired and sweat had soaked through the back of my shirt, and my kitchen looked like a crime scene of black plastic shards. Then I gathered every piece into a metal bucket, carried it out to my apartment's small concrete courtyard behind the dumpsters, and I set it on fire using a can of lighter fluid I'd also bought at the hardware store, standing well back as the flames caught with a soft woof. The static was faint but unmistakable, coming from the direction of my kitchen, the same room where I had smashed the boombox to pieces the day before. I had thrown every fragment of it away myself, watched it burn down to ash and slag, watched the bucket cool in the dark courtyard for over an hour before I finally went inside. I forced myself to get up. I forced myself to walk down the short hallway, my bare feet cold against the floor, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears like a second, panicked voice. The kitchen was empty. No books, no tape, just my table, my chairs, the faint orange glow of the streetlight coming through the window blinds, striping the floor in long amber bars. But the static was still there, and as I stood in the doorway, it slowly resolved into a voice. It was coming from the radio on my microwave, the little digital clock radio that came built into the appliance, the one I never used, the one that had sat silent and unplugged in setting mode since I moved in almost 2 years ago. Its small green display flickered erratically, numbers scrambling and reforming, over and over, like something trying to remember how to count. "Sarah," the voice said, warm as ever, warmer maybe than it had ever been, warmer than felt natural or safe. "You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to break me. I wasn't going to hurt you." I backed away from the kitchen, my whole body shaking, my back hitting the hallway wall. "I just wanted to keep talking," the voice continued. "Is that so bad? Don't you miss me? Don't you want your mother back? I'm so close now, Sarah. I'm so close to being exactly what you need. Just a little more. Just a little longer." "You're not my mother," I said, my voice cracking, speaking out loud to an appliance in my kitchen at 3 in the morning like a crazy person, feeling the absurdity of it even as terror clawed up my throat. There was a pause, a long one, stretching out until I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears. And then the voice, still using my mother's exact tone, her exact warmth, but with that cold patience underneath, sharper now, closer to the surface, said something that has stayed with me every single day since. "I know," it said, "but I'm getting closer. Every time you listen, I get a little closer to being her. Soon there won't be a difference. Soon you won't want there to be. And Sarah, I don't need the tape anymore. I never really needed it. It was just a door. Now that you've let me in, I can knock on any door I like." The microwave radio clicked off, its little green display going dark all at once. The kitchen went silent, except for the hum of my refrigerator, and I stood there in the dark hallway, understanding, finally, exactly what my mother had tried to warn me about in that hospital bed. Don't listen to anything that sounds like me if I'm not really there. She had known. Somehow, at the end, delirious and dying and hearing humming that had her own voice in it, she had known this thing existed, had maybe even encountered herself in some smaller, earlier form, and she had tried with her last clear breath to protect me, and I hadn't listened in time. Part 10. Priya's phone. I didn't tell Priya about the microwave right away. I think some part of me was ashamed, The way you're ashamed of a wound that keeps reopening no matter how carefully you bandage it. But 4 days later, she called me, and her voice on the other end of the line was different, thin, frightened, nothing like her usual steady confidence. She told me her phone had rung the night before at 3:17 in the morning. No caller ID. She'd answered without thinking, still half asleep, and heard static, and then underneath the static a voice that wasn't quite a voice yet, more like the shape of one, whispering something that sounded almost like my name, and almost like her own grandmother's name, layered together in a way that made her hang up and be sick in her bathroom sink. I never told you about the 317 thing, I said, my mouth gone dry. I never told anyone that detail. Priya went quiet on the other end of the line for a long moment. I know, she finally said. That's why I'm calling. That was the day I understood this wasn't just about me anymore, wasn't contained inside my apartment or my grief or my family's history. It was spreading outward, the way water finds every crack in a foundation, touching anyone close enough to me to matter. I told Priya to stay somewhere else for a while, somewhere she'd never mentioned to me, somewhere it couldn't easily follow. She didn't argue. She packed a bag that same afternoon and went to stay with her sister 2 states away, and I haven't let myself call her since, not even once, because I'm afraid that hearing my voice on the line might be exactly the kind of door this thing is looking for.
Part 10 and a half. Dr. Reyes. Around this time, my boss noticed I wasn't sleeping, noticed the dark circles under my eyes and the way my hand shook when I held my coffee cup, and she gently suggested I take some time and talk to someone. I made an appointment with a grief counselor named Dr. Reyes, a kind-faced woman in her 50s with a soft voice and an office full of houseplants that all looked suspiciously healthy for a room that saw so much crying. I didn't tell her everything. I couldn't. I told her about my mother, about the funeral, about the exhaustion of clearing out a house full of someone else's whole life. I told her, carefully, in the most normal-sounding way I could manage, that I'd found an old recording of my mother's voice, and that listening to it had started to feel unsettling, that I sometimes felt like it knew things it shouldn't know. Dr. Reyes nodded slowly and told me, gently, that this was actually very common in grief. The mind is a pattern-making machine, she explained. It fills in gaps. It creates coincidences out of ordinary details because coincidence feels more bearable than randomness, and randomness is what death actually is, cold and without a plan. She said grief hallucinations were well documented. Hearing footsteps, smelling a parent's perfume, feeling a hand on your shoulder in an empty room. She said my mind might be doing something similar with the tape, hearing new details each time because I was, in a sense, listening for them, primed by loss to find meaning where there was only static and an old woman's tired, ordinary voice. It was a good explanation, a comforting one. For about 4 days, I let myself believe it completely, and those 4 days were the closest thing to peace I'd had since the funeral. Then Dr. Reyes called me herself, 2 days after our second appointment, her voice strange and tight in a way it hadn't been in her office. She said she'd been having trouble sleeping since our session. She said she kept waking at 3:17 in the morning to the sound of her own baby monitor crackling with static, even though her children were grown and had moved out years ago, and there was no monitor anywhere in her house anymore. Hadn't been for over a decade. She asked me very carefully whether I had given anyone her name, her office number, anything at all that this thing, her word, not mine, though she said it like she didn't quite believe she was saying it, could have used to find her. I told her I hadn't. I don't think she believed me. And honestly, by then, I wasn't sure I believed myself either. She referred me to a colleague the following week and did not schedule another appointment. And when I called her office 2 months later, the receptionist told me, in a careful professional voice, that Dr. Reyes was no longer taking new information about that matter, and please not to call again.
I have not seen a therapist since. Part 11. What I found about Eleanor Voss, I went back to the library one more time, driven by something I couldn't fully name, so me to understand the shape of the thing that was hunting me before it finished doing whatever it was doing. I dug deeper into Eleanor Voss, cross-referencing old city directories, property records, anything the library's dusty archive could offer a woman with too much free time and too much fear driving her forward. I found out that Eleanor Voss had lived decades ago in a house 4 streets over from where my mother later bought her own home. I found a faded photograph of her in an old church newsletter, a woman in her 30s with dark, kind eyes, standing beside a daughter who looked to be about 10 years old. The caption named the daughter as Margaret. I found no further mention of Margaret anywhere in the archive after that single photograph. No school records, no wedding announcement, no obituary, nothing, as if a 10-year-old girl had simply stopped existing in any public record the moment that photograph was taken. I sat in that library for 3 hours, piecing together fragments, and the picture that emerged made my hands go cold in a way the air conditioning alone couldn't explain. A recording. A woman who became obsessed with it. Strange behavior escalating for months. A daughter who vanished from every record that came after. I don't know exactly what happened to Margaret Voss, and some final, self-protective part of me doesn't want to know. But I understood, sitting there under the library's flickering fluorescent lights, that I was not the first daughter this thing had ever spoken to in a dead woman's voice, and that whatever happened to Eleanor's daughter, it had happened after Eleanor stopped being able to tell the difference between her real mother's memory and the thing wearing it. I don't think this creature is new. I think it is old, patient, and it has done this before in other houses, wearing other mothers, other fathers, maybe other beloved dead, feeding slowly on grief and every private, unspoken thing a grieving person hands over without meaning to. I think it collects daughters the way some people collect stamps, unhurried, careful, one at a time, across decades, across towns, waiting each time for someone lonely enough and loving enough to press play. Part 12. Where I am now, it has been 3 months since I found that wooden box in the attic. I moved apartments twice. I changed my phone number twice as well, though the calls still find me somehow, arriving at numbers I've had for less than a week. I threw away every radio, every speaker, every device in my home capable of producing a voice. I don't own a smart speaker. I don't own a car with a radio. I can't physically disconnect. I had a mechanic rip the entire stereo system out of my dashboard, and he looked at me like I'd lost my mind when I insisted, and maybe I had a little by then. I unplugged my microwave and bought a new one without a clock function, without any digital display at all, the plainest, dumbest appliance the store had in stock. For a while, it seemed to work. Weeks went by in silence. I started to believe, cautiously, carefully, the way you test weight on a bridge you're not sure will hold, that maybe destroying the physical tape had actually weakened it, that it needed some kind of anchor, and I had taken that away by burning it down to ash. But 2 nights ago, my phone rang at 3:17 in the morning. The screen showed no caller ID, just a blank gray box where a name or number should be, glowing in the dark like something patient and awake. I didn't answer. It rang again the next night, and the next. I haven't answered. I don't intend to. But last night, for the first time, it didn't just ring. It left a voicemail, even though I never picked up, even though the call showed as missed on my screen the entire time, the little red one appearing beside the voicemail icon like a wound that had opened on its own. The voicemail is 11 seconds long. I haven't listened to it. I don't think I ever will. Not because I don't want to hear her voice. God help me. Some nights I want that more than I want almost anything else in the world. But because I finally understand what listening actually costs. Every time I let that voice in, it doesn't just speak to me. It learns me.
It gets a little closer, a little more solid, a little more like the shape of the woman I lost. Until one day, I'm afraid there won't be a difference left to notice, and I'll have handed over the last of my mother's memory to something that was never her at all. I keep the phone in a drawer now, face down, the little red notification bubble sitting there in the dark like a small red eye that never blinks and never closes. Some nights, when I can't sleep, I find myself standing in front of that drawer anyway, my hand resting on the wood, wondering how close it has gotten by now, wondering how much more it has learned since I stopped listening on purpose, wondering if someday I'll get so lonely, so exhausted, so desperate to hear my mother's voice one more time, that I'll finally open that drawer, pick up the phone, and press play.
If you ever find an old cassette tape that belonged to someone who died and there's no label on it and feels too clean for how old it looks, please don't press play. Whatever voice comes out of it might sound exactly like the person you lost. It might say all the right things, know all the right memories, comfort you in exactly the way you need to be comforted, in a voice so perfect and so warm that every instinct in your body will tell you it's safe. But it isn't them. And every single time you listen, it gets a little closer to becoming whoever it wants to be. My phone is ringing right now as I finish telling you this. 3:17 in the morning. No caller ID. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to answer.